Thank you all for joining us for our Tech Talk. I'm Sarah Cook, and I am Director of Product Marketing for Perifery, a division of DataCore. Here with me today, I have two of my colleagues. I have Jamshid Afshar and Tony Lokko. Thank you both for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
So now you both have very long histories with the Swarm product. So why don't y'all tell us a little bit about yourselves and about your history with Swarm? Jam, you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, I've been developing and supporting various parts of Swarm for many years now, primarily around auth and S3. And I also did a lot of early containerization work using Docker with Swarm.
Great. And how about you, Tony?
Yeah, I've been with the team since 2015. I've spent a long time supporting and deploying Swarm at scale, and now I'm been developing for about 2 years, making Swarm fit into very, very small places.
Nice. So I know you've done some of the largest installations of Swarm and also some of the smallest installations of Swarm.
Yep.
So I think that really speaks to the scalability. Well, I've been hearing about containers for years, and I feel like I have an understanding of them, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot more I could learn. And so that's why I wanted to get y'all here today to speak with me. Also, I know we're doing some very exciting work with containers right now. So can you talk a little bit about exactly what containers are?
Sure. So containers are just processes that run in the Linux kernel. They're based, though, on self-contained images that are defined by Docker files that define all the libraries and the base OS that the process will use. So in that way, they can be kind of thought of as little virtual machines, but they're much thinner and lighter than that. Yeah, is there anything you want to say about them, Tony?
Yeah, I mean it sounds like a new technology, but it's been around for a good while now, and it's got a whole sweep of tools associated with it. There's Docker, of course, that was the first creators of containers, really, and now there's other tools that spawn off from there, like Podman, which will be familiar to Red Hat users, and then Docker Compose, which coordinates a large set of containers together. But it's a very rich ecosystem with lots and lots of tools and lots of ways to interact with containers. So anyone can get started, really.
Well, that's great. So tell me about I know there are a lot of advantages to using containers. So Jam, I know you were a huge advocate for them and really bringing them into the engineering process with Swarm. Can you talk a little bit about what the challenges are, or not the challenges, but the advantages, and then
Sure.
and then why you just felt that it was such a great fit for using with Swarm?
Sure. So originally, I was hearing about containers. At the same time, I was also trying to get better and automated testing of Swarm. Uh, and functional testing lends itself really well to containerization as opposed to running on bare metal, which requires more resources. So I found that the fastest way to create a Swarm environment, get it all configured, was to use, images and containers, and that allowed a lot of tests to be run, more tests than you normally could on the same set of hardware. It was also Containers are also pretty Linux OS agnostic, so you can run a Ubuntu-based container on a CentOS machine and vice versa. And it also made it easier to test different versions of our software and of the software that we use. So that allowed for easier and faster upgrade testing, minimizing regressions, and just in general, you keep configuration separate from your deployment, so that way they're always tracked, and it's not like the old days of system administration where you could go in and tweak some server setting and then you don't realize you have config drift across your environment. Is there anything you wanted to add, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, just to speak to what you were saying there about the old days of configuration and install. I mean, if you were to take a bare metal install of Swarm, you're talking about 7+ servers, each with different roles. And when we containerize Swarm, we're running all of those systems on one machine and sharing the kernel process. So we're running the same software in a much smaller package, so that we can leverage the machines and the hardware that we have in a much more hyper-converged way. And you could do this stuff with just configuration tools like Ansible and Terraform and Maz as, a Pixie booting engine, but the turnaround time on deploying bare metal is much higher. And they're much more prone to error due to just general network flakiness. So it's definitely a step in the right path.
Great. So are there any disadvantages or challenges to working with containers?
Yeah, they're meant to be ephemeral. So state can be a challenge to manage. But that's actually a pretty good thing in that it, separate. I always like containers because they separate config, the image that's running, the code, and the state, the data that you need to save between runs. But yeah, that is a challenge. That is definitely something you have to get used to. That Linux sysadmins also need to get used to deployments being automated, not done, and configuration is not done with manual tweaks. So that is definitely a bit of a change in a typical IT workflow.
Nice. So, I know that you've used containers a lot for testing, and but I know we're doing some new really interesting things with them. And I think one of the things that it's done is given us a more flexible environment that gives people some really huge advantages from the standpoint of installation and system administration. So this has already been launched on the data core side, and now it's going to be also available from Perifery in a slightly different version. So can you talk a little bit about the innovation behind doing the single node swarm?
Sure. Myself and Jam were part of a team that put together a set of tools that were based on the initial containers, and we added to that and put it all into Kubernetes so that we can scale out the network and the storage in different ways as we iterate through it, and make Swarm much smaller and much bigger at the same time. So Swarm's able to run within a Kubernetes environment, and you could utilize all of the ecosystem that Kubernetes provides on bare metal. So that means that we can leverage container storage infrastructure and container network infrastructure, so that Swarm can span out from one container to the next. We're also going to be using bucket ops and git ops to be able to run configuration as code to be able to automatically install and upgrade all of those pieces as quick as we can turn them around. So customers will get updates as soon as we have updates to give them, and they'll be downloaded and applied directly on the hardware.
Well, that's great. And so, one of the things that I'm hearing is just how easy it's going to be with single node swarm for somebody who is not a system administrator, doesn't have deep IT skills, to get this installed and up and running, and take care of that environment. Can you speak to that a little bit about those improvements?
Well, largely the swarm deployment itself is self-configuring. So using the same sort of methods that we were using in the initial containerization effort, we're configuring the ecosystem, and so jumping into configuration files and changing variables, and writing configuration files in some cases, it where that would have been the traditional swarm install. Download the RPM, install the RPM, change this config file, change that config file, save it, start up the process. You don't have to do any of that with the single node swarm deployment. It's a script that gets run, and based on the hardware it detects, it will deploy a Kubernetes environment with Swarm running in it, and you should have an S3 endpoint available within about 15 minutes.
That's really fast.
Yeah.
So, any parting words about the use of containers and what you see for the future of containers?
In general, I guess I would just say, if you're used to VMs and that style of deployment, I think you will like it. It will be a change going into the Kubernetes world and containers, but I think you will like it because it's a much more reliable and consistent way to deploy services.
So what do you think, Tony? Any parting words?
Yeah, it's definitely the way to deploy in the future, and I'm 100% sure that we're going to be sticking with it for as long as we can. The deploying containers is so much faster than deploying a traditional swarm deployment. So yeah, it's the way of the future.
Great. So yes, we'll stick with it until something better comes along.
Yeah.
And we all know
that's the
in
parting
technology,
glass.
there's always
Until it's-
something better down the road.
Yeah, until we
If you
can
wait long enough.
use ChatGPT to deploy Swarm. I think this
Oh
will be.
no, I don't think we'll go there.
Yeah.
You guys have a great day, and thank you again for joining me. And thank you all for joining us on the Tech Talk at Perifery.
All right. Thank you.